Start? Okay. Okay, so thanks for coming, everybody. My name is William George. I'm a researcher with the Kleros Cooperative. So if you're not familiar, Kleros is a blockchain-based dispute resolution platform. It's kind of a blockchain oracle optimized for dispute resolution. And today I'm going to be talking about voting, and specifically vote splitting in different cryptoeconomic systems. So if I say the words vote splitting, you probably think of vote splitting in political elections. If I have some election for parliament or for the National Assembly or for president or something, depending on the vote system you use, sometimes if you add similar candidates to candidates that exist already, that can have effects on who will win. So particularly if you use the kind of simplest voting system, the first past the post voting system or the plurality system, which is used for, say, British Parliament or US elections. So this system where you vote for one candidate and then the candidate with the most votes wins. This generally has the effect that if you have similar candidates, they kind of split up the vote among each other. And this is illustrated well by this cartoon from the 1912 US presidential election, where the incumbent Republican president, Taft, was running against two major challengers, the Democrat, Woodrow Wilson, but also a former Republican president, Teddy Roosevelt, who decided that he didn't like what Taft was doing and wanted to run again. And unsurprisingly, these two Republican heavyweights split the vote among each other, and Wilson became president. So there's been a lot of research over decades in terms of like, what are good voting systems? How do I have voting systems that resist kind of weird behavior, vote splitting and others? So this field is called social choice theory, study of voting systems. Generally, one of these problems is I have similar candidates. How do I prevent them from splitting the vote among each other? And in the world of cryptoeconomic systems, you have some voting that looks like this. In DAO voting, you have the same basic kind of structure. If I'm a voter in a DAO, there's some propositions put in front of me, and I want to choose how to vote. Well, I have some personal preferences. Like, my vote is based on who I want to win, what proposition I want to win. Maybe I have some kind of economic rationale. It's good for my bags, whatever. But fundamentally, my motivation is I want this option to win the vote. So it's very similar to political elections, and you have kind of the same similar effects. However, there are other kinds of voting in blockchain world. So particularly a lot of oracles, particularly kind of more crowdsourced oracles. The Kleros oracle is like this. Others, like UMA and a few others, use this sort of mechanism where the oracle is supposed to produce some fact about the world. I have some piece of information that the blockchain doesn't know as part of its consensus algorithm, and you're trying to bring on chain. How do you do that? People vote on it. To give a sort of illustrative example, in Kleros, what this looks like, and it's pretty similar from one oracle to another, is I take some panel of randomly chosen people, and they vote. Maybe I have a case. It's a dispute resolution platform. Kleros is optimized to resolve disputes, bring this sort of dispute information about who's right in a given dispute on chain. I have a dispute between maybe Alice and Bob. Alice has a small business. She hired Bob, a freelancer, to do some kind of task, build her a website. She's ultimately unhappy with Bob's work. And like, who's right, Alice or Bob? My randomly chosen panel of people are going to vote. And they receive economic incentives based on how they vote, using what we call a Schelling-point mechanism. So the idea of a Schelling-point or a focal point is due to the American economist Thomas Schelling, who observed empirically that when people try to play games where they coordinate, in the absence of communication, they wind up coordinating around solutions that seem natural or special for social reasons. So that seems pretty abstract, maybe, but like concretely, in the example of these kind of blockchain oracles, the general idea is the following. If I have my voters, and they look at the case, they look at the sort of thing about the world they're trying to bring on chain, they look at the Kleros dispute between Alice and Bob, they read the evidence, they think Alice has the winning case. They are incentivized to kind of agree with the community, vote the way other jurors are going to vote. In Kleros, there's like a notion of appeal. They want to vote with how the community decides after potentially some future appeals. There can be nuances, but like as a guiding principle. They want to get in the minds of the other voters and think about what like a generic juror would vote, a generic voter would vote. And then I look at the case, I think Alice has the better argument, and I think, okay, like the other voters are probably also going to think Alice has the better argument. So I'm going to vote for Alice because I think they're going to think that I'm going to vote for Alice. So like I think they vote for Alice because they think I vote for Alice because I think they vote for Alice, sort of down. And we all vote for Alice. Alice voting for the truth is a focal point or a Schelling-point. We sort of drift to it because it's a socially distinguished solution. Note, just in passing, this structure is also shared by many blockchain consensus algorithms. This is a point that was raised by Vitalik in a blog post way back in 2015, where if you have some kind of fork and there are two competing blocks to extend a chain, they're contradictory. One like has one version of a transaction, the other one has a transaction that's like incompatible. And I, as a block producer or a miner, I have to pick one to be the parent for the block that I'm going to mine as like the next block. Which one do I pick? Well, I want to pick the one that's going to get in the chain. My rewards depend on my block getting in, at least partially. I get more rewarded if my block gets into the chain. So I want to pick the parent block that will be most likely to get me and it into the chain, because that's aligns with my rewards. So the same basic payoff structure. This is just something to keep in mind. I'm going to talk mostly about this kind of like oracle situation, but the blockchain consensus is like the same game, and you can, like, some of the results apply to that as well. Okay, so back to vote splitting. Already, vote splitting was a problem in political elections. You know, people talk about this a lot in, you know, newspaper articles and columns and such. I would say that it's probably even worse in blockchain oracle problems because imagine that I have the kind of following setup where the voters in my case are confronted with 4 options. 3 of them are kind of all reasonable and similar. You know, one of them is like give Bob some more time, and you know, give Bob even a little more time, and give Bob even yet a little more time. And then there's a distinguished different option, which is just wrong. Just refund Alice, when Alice doesn't deserve to be refunded. How are the jurors going to vote? Well, like, they should ideally vote to give Bob more time, because that's the honest answer. And the Schelling-point, like, if we design the system well, should be for everyone to drift to voting for the honest answer as a strategy. But, you know, if we use maybe the bad voting system here, voting the dishonest, distinguished but different answer, that can also be a Schelling-point. It's also distinguished for social reasons. And you can imagine the voters is sort of all grouping around voting for the dishonest, distinguished answer, and that being an alternative Schelling-point. That's really bad. You really want to avoid that happening. What can we do? A classic thing to do in voting theory, in social choice theory, is to ask voters for richer information in their ballots. Instead of just voting like Alice or Bob, or, you know, like A or B, I'm going to ask my voters to rank their ballots. And then how can I, once everybody's ranked their ballot, how can I turn this into a collective decision? Well, there are different ways. One way is to use what's called the Borda system. So here you give a certain number of points for each position in your vote. If I put an option first, it gets 3 points. If I put an option second, it gets 2, and so on. And then you count up and you see which option has the most points, and it wins. Another possibility is what's called instant runoff. This is used in parliamentary elections in Australia. And here the idea is you simulate a series of runoffs where you count the number of first place votes that each option gets. And if an option gets more than half of the first place votes, you're done, it wins. And if no option gets half, then you take the option that has the fewest first place votes, you eliminate it, and you take the voters who voted for that option, and their vote defaults down to their second place. And you keep sort of eliminating options like this until somebody wins. So I'm going to use instant runoff as kind of a running example in this talk. So I'll give a little more detail, full example. Say I have these 5 voters. I count the number of first place votes. Nobody won. First round, yellow's eliminated. He got 0 votes. Second round, still nobody won. So green is eliminated. And I reattribute the vote that voted for green to pink. And now the pink angel wins. So the pink angel wins on the 3rd round. There are other ways that you can ask voters for rich information to, like, sort of get around these kinds of voting paradoxes and pathologies. There's a system called approval voting, which is very popular, where instead of asking for rankings, I ask each voter to say, okay, check yes or no for each option, whether it's approvable or not. That's an alternative thing you can do. You end up taking the option that has the highest rate of approval. I'm going to mostly focus on rankings here because it's kind of like a classic thing people talk about in social choice theory, but, like, there are alternatives. Okay, now, a lesson of decades of research in social choice theory is that there's no perfect voting system. Every voting system has some problems. If you've ever heard of arrows and possibility theorem, it's sort of in this vein. Social choice theorists have spent decades creating these like elaborate tables where you have voting systems on one side and properties we would want voting systems to have on another. And you can say, okay, like this voting system has this and this, but not that. This one has, well, it doesn't have this, but it has this and this. These two properties are just incompatible. I have a theorem saying that if you have this, you can never have that. And you wind up having to make trade-offs. You pick the voting system that makes the most sense for you. And in particular, one of these columns here, clone independence, is particularly relevant for vote splitting. And I'm going to focus on that and sort of how it manifests itself in blockchain systems. So clones are this idea related to vote splitting that was particularly explored by Nicholas Tidman. He defined clones as follows, where a set of clones is a set of options that are ranked consecutively in all the votes. So here the angels are clones. Some of the votes put them 1, 2, 3. Some of them put them 2, 3, 4. But they all put them together. Some people may think the angel is better or worse than the devil. Some people think that maybe the devil's better than the angels. But like wherever I put the angels, I put all three of them together because I think they're basically the same. And then a clone-independent voting system is one where if I delete an alternative from the set of clones, basically nothing happens. If the winner was not in the set of clones before the deletion, same winner. And the winner is in the set of clones before the deletion, if and only if the winner is in the set of clones after the deletion. So you can sort of change from deleting a clone, can change you from one clone winning to another clone winning, but otherwise it doesn't have an impact on the outcome. In my example with instant runoff voting, I take my 5 votes from before. I said that the pink angel won in this example. What if I just delete the pink angel? Now the green angel wins, if you sort of recalculate things. And this is a reflection of the fact that instant runoff, if you take an appropriate tie break, there's some nuances around tie breaks, instant runoff is a clone-independent voting system. Okay, so now back to blockchain oracles. In blockchain oracles, like we have these economic incentives. I'm rewarded based on how I vote and how other people vote. And it's not a matter of trying to get my preferences to win anymore. It's like ultimately the system is trying to bring information about the real world on chain, and you want the system to produce like true information. So what do my incentives look like generally? Well, I kind of think that like I have some truth. Maybe in like a given case, the true answer is the pink angel should win. And then I receive a signal. Each juror is going to receive a signal. Each voter is going to receive a signal that's like the pink angel winning plus some noise. And the result of that signal is like this fuzzy angel. Maybe I can't quite tell the color. The clones are all very similar, so I like the true signal was pink, and I wound up thinking yellow. It's a little fuzzy. I think the angel is the best choice. I can't really tell. Maybe the devils want one, or is the true signal. And I wind up with like a probability distribution for how I think each of the options is likely to be the truth based on my signal. And then what should the incentive function would be? Well, the system doesn't know what the truth is either. That's the point. We're trying to bring this information on chain. So it'll take each voter's vote and kind of piece them together and try to come up with its like own probability distribution of how likely a given thing is to be the truth, ideally in an attack-resistant way, and then pay people accordingly. And what this generally looks like, there's some flexibility in this space, is to basically reward people who rank options that are collectively ranked highly. If you rank that option highly, you are rewarded. And if you rank options that are collectively ranked highly quite low, then you're penalized. So here we saw the winning option is the pink angel. If I put the pink angel first, I jackpot. The voter in the middle put sort of the pink angel in the middle, but like they're angels at the top. They did okay. And the person who put the devil first, even though the angel won, they get nothing. Maybe they're penalized. And now is like a very simple example of a payoff function like that I'm going to use as like a toy example for like the following couple of observations and examples is the following. So this is an extremely simple payoff function. If I put the winning option last, I'm slashed. If I put anything other than the winning option last, I'm cool. No effect on my payoffs. This is an extreme version of this kind of like payoff function where I'm trying to put like the winning option as high as possible. And now, this is an example. Suppose that I receive the following signal, fuzzy angel, and I'm voting between yellow angel and devil. I have 2 choices. And I'm trying to simulate how the other voters are going to vote. And I think because I saw the angel, that they're probably more likely to see the angel than not. However, in this case, just for the sake of example, I think that the other jurors or like the other voters are better informed than me. I think they're more likely to see the truth. They'll have less noise in their signal. Maybe I'm new. This is the first case I've ever done, and like I sort of realize I'm not so great at this yet. And the other people are experienced. They know what they're doing. So I don't know whether they're going to put angel or devil first, but I think they're going to pick the same answer. So I think maybe 55% chance they both pick the angel, 45% chance they both pick the devil. And then what's my incentive to do? Well, best, I'm going to vote for the angel because like binary choice, the angel seems like it's more likely to be than the devil. So I was incentivized to vote my signal. Basically with any payoff function or voting system that's even remotely reasonable, instant runoff plus the simple payoff function before, like I would be incentivized to vote for the angel first. Now what happens if I add a clone? Now I have angel plus 2 devils. And the same signal as before, except that I don't really know how the other jurors are going to vote for the clones. I think there's a 55% chance they'll see the angel first. And then, well, like, between the 2 devils, I think it's as likely that they put one before the other than the other. So basically, I split the 55% chance that I think the angel is first into 4 equal categories of 13.5%, where in one case they both put the red devil first, in another case they both put the purple devil first, and then there are like the mixed cases that they're also equally likely where they sort of one puts the red, one puts the purple first. Same thing for the 45% chance where I think that they put the devils first, and now I have this like augmented signal. Same idea as before, but with these 3 options, 2 of which are clones. And here, what happens if I calculate my maximum expected return for all the different ways I could vote based on how I think other people are going to vote using instant runoff voting and the simple payoff function, my expected value is maximized by putting one devil first, then angel, then other devil. So separating the clones. Like, voting for the clones together is not in Nash equilibrium. Even though the other 2 voters put the clones together, the 2 devils together, it's not in my incentive to do so. I'm incentivized to like game the system somehow, to like pull the clones apart. Why did this happen? Well, like, basically, like, instant runoff is a very top-heavy voting system. Like, who you vote first counts a lot. Your second place vote only ever matters if your first place is already eliminated. So your first place vote is very valuable. This payoff function is obviously very like last place heavy. It only cares about who you vote last. So by doing this sort of mixed vote, I can basically have my cake and eat it too, where I can have the advantages of putting a clone first in impacting like which of the 2 clones is likely to win. If one of the clones is likely to win, by putting the red devil first, it's like really likely to be the red devil. And by putting the purple devil last, I can kind of take advantage of like the fact that I think the purple devil, the devils in general, are less likely to win than the angel. So like already, I kind of want to have one of the devils last. And by putting the red devil first, I have sucked away winning chances from the purple devil, so that like really there's not so much chance the purple devil wins. So that's not great. In some sense, like even though instant runoff was a clone-independent voting system, it's not resistant to these kinds of manipulations once you include economic incentives. However, we have a theorem that's in the paper that I submitted for the proceedings here that in like a fairly simple case with that very simple payoff function before, all the same setup, except if you change the voting system for a different voting system called ranked pairs, it's another famous voting system, then this doesn't happen. Now voting the clones together is a weak Nash equilibrium. So like this setup, even though the incentives are the same, I just changed the voting system, is more resistant to these kinds of clones effects. I think I'll skip over telling you how ranked pairs works, kind of running low on time. But it's interesting that ranked pairs was the voting system that was originally proposed by Tidman when he was writing about clones. It's sort of like, when he was trying to like come up with like what's a clone-resistant voting system, like that's what he was thinking about. And even though there are other voting systems that are clone-resistant, this ranked pairs voting system that like was designed with clone independence as like a motivating property is somehow like maybe more clone-resistant. It has these new clone resistance properties that like it still hold in this kind of economic setting for blockchain oracles. So generally, before I showed you this giant table of like different properties and different trade-offs and voting systems, I think that in this field, we can expand that table and have like columns for blockchain oracle voting properties, the kinds of things we'd want in being resistant to kinds of manipulations and attacks in the world of blockchain oracles. And here, we have these like two notions of clone independence, like the classical voting system clone independence, and this like, are you incentivized to separate your clones? How well does my system hold up when I have clone options and economic incentives? So just to conclude, we saw that clone options have different impacts in sort of governance preference voting versus the incentive voting that we have in the world of blockchain oracles and consensus algorithms. And that interestingly, even when you like have a fixed payoff function, everything's the same, and the only thing you change is the voting system, that can change stuff. And it's not just enough for that voting system to be clone independent. So there are these like very subtle interactions between voting systems and payoff functions that I think there's a lot of space to explore. So maybe I can take some time for questions.
I take the mic in case you guys have questions. Yes. Could you hand it up?
Hi. Very good talk, thanks. I had a question though, I wasn't quite clear about one point. You have this signal that's coming through to the voters. Where does that signal come from?
So in the world of blockchain oracles, we imagine that there's this like information that, like an observer could see, but the blockchain consensus algorithm could not see because, it's not like saying whether someone saying whether it like rained in a given place or whether like who was right in a commercial dispute. These kinds of informations about like things that you can see off chain are not available to the consensus algorithm, but they're available to observers. So basically, it comes from reality. In the case of Kleros, where I have like a dispute resolution platform, it's an oracle-related disputes. Basically, it's a matter of looking at the evidence of a commercial dispute and making up my mind about who I think is right in that dispute.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions?
Yeah, thank you so much for the presentation. I was wondering, based on which criteria do you select the properties of the mechanism that you would want to favor in a system?
So can you elaborate?
Because you said that different voting systems have different properties, and then the question would be, for each particular use case, based on which process, or based on which method do you select the mechanism or the properties that you're looking for? Is it purely a trade-off between the properties that you're looking for, or are there any other approaches to this?
Yeah, I mean, it depends somewhat on the setup that you're in. So, for example, already in the world of clone resistance, how much do I care about clones as a property? It sort of depends on the setting that I'm in. In political elections, if I'm deciding whether I prioritize it or not, if it's really easy to get a candidate on the ballot, then you probably care about clones more. Because it's easy to have an attack where, I only need 100 signatures or something to get my name on the ballot. And I can flood the ballot with all these similar candidates. That might impact how people vote in that election. Whereas if the threshold to get on the ballot is really high, it's okay, I'm only going to have 3 or 4 fairly distinct candidates anyway. Clone resistance isn't so important. Whereas the other properties in the table have different kinds of manipulations. Things about if I do if I keep my first place vote the same, but I change options later on in my vote, what impact can that have? If I move an option up, option A wins, I put it 3rd place out of 5, and then I move it to 2nd. It'd be weird if that causes option A to lose, but in some voting systems that happens. It winds up being sort of a UX question for your voters in a real election or your users in a blockchain oracle, that what kinds of manipulations are they going to find natural? What things are they going to be cautious about and anticipate? Oh, maybe I shouldn't do this because I realize there's some effect.
One more.
I thought that you wanted one more. Sorry.
Thank you. Great presentation. I really liked it.
How do you see voting system interacting with AI agents? So, like, do you feel like we'll, I mean, of course, voting is cumbersome for humans. It takes time-consuming. You have status-seeking behavior as well, like just all the worst of politics, but just on chain. How do you think AI agents can help with that?
Yeah, so we definitely think that AI agents will be voters in systems like this. The sort of question is whether the voting theory when the voters are agents is different than the voting theory when the voters are humans. I'd say that's an interesting open question. We've run some experiments on sort of past Kleros data where we gave past cases to a bunch of LLMs and we saw the rates at which they voted for different options. And they wound up voting fairly similarly to human beings. They disagreed at the same rate as human beings, like among each other and with the human beings. I mean, there were sort of like some interesting differences, but you know, at a first approximation, it seems that all this theory is like probably going to be relevant whether the voters are AI agents or human beings. In how much you care about clones, well, sort of depends on like what kinds of disputes you're having, what kinds of questions you have. And particularly for AI agents, I can imagine that we'll have a lot more like kind of like small commercial disputes where like one AI agent is paying another AI agent. These like kind of like task disputes have actually not been so common in Kleros so far. We've more had like disputes that have wound up being binary for various reasons. Whereas like if an AI agent is hiring another agent, it's more likely to have the things that are sort of what I was showing, where like Alice bot is hiring Bob bot, and you know the question of whether Bob bot deserves more time is like very relevant. So in those disputes, like clones are more important. Like you know whether like it's basically it's hard to say, but probably the theory applies similarly.
Thank you.
I have a final one from observations in voting design. For some reason, humans tend to be very focused on the voting rule. So I have never seen a system where the voting rule was defined based on the ballot. And I mean, you're also pointing in a direction where why don't we define the voting rule once we have the ballot and case by case? And here I think agents make a huge difference because they simply adapt. They can use whatever voting rule, whereas I don't know how it works at Kleros. I guess you have a very well-defined system with a dedicated voting rule. I don't know if you even offer alternatives or if you have different cases, different voting rules. How does this work in practice?
So in V1, we have a fixed voting rule. It's actually plurality. But in V2, which is now in beta and is gradually becoming live, we allow different modules which have different voting rules for different types of cases. But you still generally pick the module that your case is going to use before there would be a dispute. Like the idea of like having people vote or, you know, like the dispute is already live and then picking the voting rule, you know, it's going to be potentially hard to do that in a decentralized context where like in some sense maybe you like pick a voting rule at random, you have like a bank of voting rules and you pick one random, that could potentially work and could suppress strategic behavior. Like if the parties to the dispute have to agree on the voting rule when there's already a dispute, that can be complicated.
All right, thanks so much, William. Another round of applause for this awesome talk. And next on stage is a talk by Elim Okenegaro. He is going to talk about legitimate overrides in decentralized protocols. This is also related to governance, but we chose this talk because it